Hello and welcome to part 2 on the Sicilian dragon, in which we cover the Yugoslav attack variation. So today I'm just going to go over a game that was played in 1960, and Leonid Stein had the white pieces, and he's playing against another chess master. So let's see how this plays out. Now, something to remember in the Sicilian defense, there can be a lot of transpositions. Well, in many openings, that's possible. So we're going to see a little bit of transposition happening here. So in the Sicilian defense, you start out with e4, e5, or excuse me, e4, c5. And what does that do? Well, it discourages white from immediately pushing forward, or this pawn could capture, queen would recapture, and then the knight could chase the queen. So what does white do? White plays this knight move first to help fortify this future pawn push. So a common move is to just push this d pawn to d6 to prevent this pawn from pushing forward and chasing this knight. But that didn't happen. The pawn did not chase the knight. Instead, we have knight developing to defend the pawn, and now d6 is played. So we're going to transpose back into the normal move order with the d4 pawn push, capture, recapture. And now you'll notice that white has more space in the center because of his advanced pawn, and he has a slight lead in development. But black has the two central pawns versus white's single central pawn. So white wants to play for some type of attack, whereas if pieces are traded down and we go into an endgame, black could potentially have an advantage with these two central pawns versus one. It could help him control the center a little bit better. So the game continues with g6, and we have the dragon variation, which was probably named that after these pawns, this pawn island from d6 over to h7. It perhaps forms the shape of a dragon, maybe. So the game continues with bishop to e3, where you place this bishop here, put the queen behind it, creating a battery, and you may try and exchange off the dark squared dragon bishop. Okay, the dragon bishop is developed and black is ready to castle. So now we have f3 being played to prevent any harassment of this bishop here. Also by pushing this pawn to f3, you can push to g4 in the future and start a pawn storm up the board. But in the meantime, we have castling by black. The bishop develops here. Often the queen might develop here immediately. But as I said, this game was played in 1960. So in this series of videos on the Sicilian defense dragon variation and then the Yugoslav attack, which is, if we play this a little bit further here, the Yugoslav attack is basically where you bring the queen up here, you create this battery, exchange off this defending bishop, and then you can throw these pawns forward, with a pawn storm towards black's king. But in the meantime, often white will castle to the queen side, so black could create a pawn storm of his own on the other side of the board. So let's see how it plays out. The computer didn't like this a6 move. Apparently immediately developing the knight might have been the better move. From there, you wouldn't have to worry about white taking your knight, or it would just fortify your center after you capture with the b pawn towards the center. And also, if the knight moves here, there could be a further jump to e5 attacking this unprotected bishop. So the game continues with the queen finally moving up with the threat of pushing the bishop up here and trading off that dragon bishop, which does a lot of good defending and also for offense, attacking down towards the queen side, which is where which is where white will probably castle. So the pawn storm begins where black attacks this bishop, bishop retreats, and now we have a fianchetto of the light squared bishop. The computer says this is a mistake, and it kind of helps white grow their lead. Apparently, it would have been better to immediately attack this knight. So let's see how things continue here. We have queenside castling by white. This creates a battery up the half open file, potentially targeting this d6 pawn. If the e pawn moves forward 1 or 2 squares, that could leave a weakened backwards pawn on d6, and that could be vulnerable. All right, so we have the attack on the knight. And now, this is something you might want to remember. Normally you don't want to move your knight to the edge of the board, but it helps in the defense here. It kind of blocks the path of this a pawn and slows things down over here. All right, so the game continues with that pawn moving forward, but now there's nowhere else these pawns can go. For the moment, they're just blockaded pretty good here. All right, h4, white starts a pawn storm of his own on the h file, a common theme in this Yugoslav attack where you push this pawn forward, either sacrificing the pawn or preparing a g4 pawn push and then pushing forward. Let's see what happens. So knight develops, although the computer doesn't like that move. Instead, I guess this was preferred, h5. And that's a possibility, a way to defend against this Yugoslav attack. But if black plays h5, at some point g4 could be played, trying to open up lines. So immediately white finds the best move, pushing forward, sacrificing the h-pawn. After the capture, we have the pawn storm continuing with g4, knight retreats, and now bishop to h6, preparing to exchange off that good defender and a good offensive piece as well, aimed down through the center. Well, not there, but over here, I should say. All right. One thing to remember, if black would have moved his rook to e8 earlier, well, then this bishop could just move back here and you could retain that dark squared bishop. But in this case, we have d5 being played in inaccuracy. Apparently, bishop to h8, they prefer that. Keeping the dark squared bishop, and, of course, then you could just give up your dark squared bishop for the rook, perhaps. But another common theme in the Sicilian defense, not just the dragon in this Yugoslav attack, but in many variations in the Sicilian, black will try to push this d pawn up to d5, and that helps free his position. Once that's achieved, that's usually pretty good, but here the computer doesn't like that move. So now we have exchange of the bishops. The king recaptures there, and now queen delivers the check. And after this retreat, apparently king to h8 would have been better. We have pawn attacking the knight. So this move is good, but apparently knight to f5 would have been an even better move. Wow, that would lead to a mate in 8. So, I guess we could take a look at that. Knight to f5. And that threatens a mate in 1 here. So, after capture, we have g5 attacking the knight. Queen to b8, c7, or king to h8. But it looks like, you'd be giving this knight up. So, if we go with the top move here, they recommend queen to b8. Well, then you have capture. Oh wow, queen to f4 check, just giving up the queen is the best option. But this variation does not look good for black there. So if we go back to the game, we have this push of the pawn, attacking black's knight on f6. The block, this is a mistake, which actually leads to a mate in 3. Wow. Okay, e6 was best. So just pushing this pawn and giving up the knight, because then the other knight could jump in there and defend, preventing the mate. So we have that, and rook captures, a brilliant move there after recapture. Well, now knight to f5 is the best move, but there's a missed opportunity here. Let's see, what could you do after this knight to f5 move, threatening mate in 1? Is there any way to defend that? Wow, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like there's any way to defend against that. So I don't know what happened there. I guess the chess master overlooked that. This simple move here. Well, just goes to show that sometimes chess masters are not perfect. But yeah, he missed a mate in 2. So instead, this move was played, and now we have capture, knight attacking the queen and threatening this mate in 1 again. So rook defends against the mate, but the queen is captured. And after this move, some material is traded down. And this is where the game ended at this point. And what do we have here? White is just ahead. But that's interesting that white did miss that, quick checkmate there. So don't feel bad if you overlook something. Even chess masters do that as well. All right. Well, if we look at the game review, let's see what what happened here according to the computer. 81.8% accuracy for the winner, Leonid Stein, versus 75.4% by his opponent. And one brilliant move, one great move. As far as bad moves, that one miss by the winner, where he probably missed that quick checkmate, but he won in the end, I guess. And 3 inaccuracies and 3 mistakes by his opponent. Apparently, Leonid Stein played at a 2200 level, and his opponent played at a 2050 level. 100% opening accuracy for the winner, as opposed to 97.6% for his opponent. And then in the middle game, there was 72.1% accuracy for the winner, but only 57.4% for his opponent. All right. Well, I hope that was an interesting example for you. In the future videos for this series, maybe I'll go over some more recent Sicilian Dragon games. That way you can get an idea of how they used to play in the past, what they're doing, in modern times, because things do change a little bit. And whatever opening you're going to work on, just remember that, opening theory is always changing. So, whatever is great today, something better might come along, or they might find a bad move in a variation, causing that whole variation to be bad. So yeah, just get out there and experiment with the Sicilian Dragon. You can try the Yugoslav attack. Whatever you do, feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy hearing what you have to say. You can put in a request if there's something specific you'd like to see in future videos. So thank you for watching, and have a super chess day.